Celebrating the 30th anniversary is just an amazing thing.
There's absolutely no way I would have believed coming out of Denver State School that I'd be sitting here right now knowing what I know, seeing the changes that I've seen.
The laws are on our side, so I hope we could open doors.
There was a real need for something to help the public understand people with disabilities better, because they had really bad preconceived notions. Massachusetts Special Olympics hired me full-time in '82, and I told them that I'll work for them if they allowed me to do, in that day it was called integrated sports. So did integrated sports at the summer games. It worked out really well. I had met with Eunice Kennedy Shriver, the founder of Special Olympics. I went down to her home in Virginia. Mrs. Shriver listened to everybody in the room, their opinions after we went back and forth, and she said, we're going to do this. In 1989, everything became official. By that time, there were probably 12 states pilot testing it, and they were doing it, and they were all finding out that it was really moving the needle for non-disabled people in terms of their viewpoints of people with disabilities. And all of a sudden, you had a few programs who thought inclusion was a really good thing, that sports was a phenomenal thing, and they started to do it, and then it started to grow. Well, the good news in Connecticut when I came here is that this is not a state where I had to twist a lot of arms. So right away, when we started doing the adult community unified sports programs, people were really into it.
A light bulb went on, and I thought to myself very quickly that, you know, we as school officials were not in any way serving the needs of the intellectually disabled youngsters.
And Mike said, listen, we'd like to do unified sports in the schools.
I felt that the CIAC had an obligation to serve all of its youngsters and not just those who were athletically able.
And we put our heads together and came up with an opportunity to get a grant from the International Office of Special Olympics, and we were able to start doing unified sports in the schools here. We were the first in the country to do that.
I was incredibly intrigued by the concept, but I will admit I was a little skeptical about whether or not it would actually work in practice. Based on my experience growing up in school where kids weren't entirely accepting and inclusive, I was just worried that there might not be enough young people out there who would embrace this idea and run with it.
Once people started to do it, then they really loved it.
I could not have been more wrong, and I should have given young people more credit. What I've seen from them, the compassion, the tolerance, the acceptance, the human decency, it's just a beautiful thing.
Through unified sports, we realized rather quickly that a lot of the barriers that existed in our schools broke down.
It was a way to include them in something that wasn't strictly academic, something that recognized them as individuals and as a team.
We didn't fully expect the program to take off as quickly and as strongly as it did.
It's even gone to the next level where the unified sports programs in these schools are just like the varsity sports in these schools.
The simple answer to why the program grew so successfully could be fully understood if one were simply to go to one of our events and see the satisfaction and the joy, the excitement that was being promoted through our unified sports program.
One thing that we did in Berlin, and then we ended up going to other school systems to show them how you can start your program, we started having games at the halftime of varsity games. So you have a couple hundred people in a gym watching the varsity play, and all of a sudden halftime comes and here comes the unified sports teams, and people didn't leave the gym. They were like in awe.
It was a legacy that we built. And you don't do it alone. You do it with a team of students who have matured before your very eyes.
It has just grown tremendously over the years, and to a degree that I never even envisioned possible when I started. We had a tiny handful of schools in a couple of pockets of the state.
During my tenure, I watched it grow from hundreds of students to thousands of students, and from one event in the spring to probably 14 events in the spring.
And now I think there are almost 400 or 500 schools competing. I've lost track.
The other pieces that are so excited about the program is that there's a national recognition.
And that whole thing that we started here in Connecticut has now been taken up by Special Olympics North America, and they got a Department of Education grant where every single state in the United States is now doing what we do here.
There's so much enthusiasm in this office, and then what emanates from Bo's office.
There's a global element to this now.
The expansion of unified sports has always been Bo's #1. And he came to me and he said, Ann, you need to go to South Africa to do a unified sports conference bringing together the Nelson Mandela Children's Fund people and the Special Olympics people in Johannesburg. And the goal was for me to merge these two into a unified program, similar to here, where I reported to the CIAC board and I reported to the Special Olympics board. I had two bosses. We did icebreaker activities, we did trust activities, we did team building activities with them. We mixed up the groups. I told my stories. They shared their problems, concerns, and difficulty in trying to get things going. There was a moment when one of the gentlemen from the Nelson Mandela Children's Fund group stood up and he said, we came into this room 5 days ago as two separate adults, and we leave today as parents, and our child is Unified Sports South Africa.
You do get to see love in action, you get to see what that really means.
It's just like a web expanding and growing, and it's a wonderful thing to see.
If there wasn't the history of Unified, the experience that the kids are experiencing today in 2022 would not be there to be fulfilled.
I have to say, and say proudly, that in my 30 years and the things that we as an organization were able to accomplish, the one that I'm most proud of is the Unified Sports Program.
Let me win what is I cannot win. Let me be brave. Indian 10th.
All right, let's hear it for Robert.
Yeah, Robert!